Welcome to Crazy Wednesday here at Hayter Institute. We're looking at workplace health and safety tonight, session 2. And it's work safely in client care, and it's CHCWHS002. Let me just go down to our acknowledgement. Sorry, just not having a good night of it. I have to get them to edit the whole first beginning. All right. So let me do an acknowledgement of country first. In the spirit of reconciliation, Hayter Institute of Education acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first inhabitants of this nation and the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live and study. We express our gratitude for the sharing of this land, our sorrow for the personal, spiritual and cultural costs of that sharing, and hope that we may move forward together in harmony and in the spirit of healing. We pay our respects to all First Nations people and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. Just a little bit of housekeeping here. So cameras on, microphones off, break times 7 and 8 p.m. Class petition with a hand emoji. Want to make sure that we stress that we all take time out for ourselves, make sure we rest our brains. I'll be doing that this week. And respectful relationships, watching our language, how we actually interact with each other. It's really crucial because this is about our duty of care and as workers in the community. It's a practice that we'll have out there. And also I want you to remember that you're important as well. It's not just about your participant or client's welfare. It's about your welfare as well. So being able to communicate well what you need is important as well. So tonight we're looking at responding to risks, and we're looking at hazards, injuries to the musculoskeletal system, reflections that we have to do in the industry, stress and fatigue, safety signs and symbols. All right. Let's start with our keep work health and safety a priority. Just going to pause record. I just bring it back to the room. Zoe, can I ask you a question? When you started with your place of work, did they take you through a workplace health and safety induction?
No.
Okay. Do you see signs around the Centre for Workplace Health and Safety?
Well, we do in home, like in the client's home. So, but I've seen nothing of it.
You do risk assessments before going into homes?
I couldn't answer that one because I'm only in established places at the moment.
Okay, so it'd be good if you could find out some of their processes here, because then that will tell you about the industry and around that safe. What do you do to prepare yourself to go into somebody's home?
Well, luckily I've been with somebody each time I've gone into there. But I mean, I've been to 3 different places, and sort of when I'm going in, I'm sort of plotting what's where,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
both before we come in, so like obviously the pathways and that getting into there, and then, looking around the homes to see, you know, where I suppose tripping hazards and all that sort of stuff are, and sort of alternate exits as well,
Yes. Yeah.
just so that, if anything does happen, they can get out.
You've got that important scan thing happening. Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Does anybody else work in client care?
Yeah.
Hamish, yeah. Did you start this week?
Yeah. Yes, I did. It was
Excellent.
really good.
So is it in center or in the home?
It's in center, but we pick people up from their home to
Oh, yeah.
pick them. They're all very high needs, to be
Yep.
honest.
Yep.
So yeah, we got to pick them up, but there's kind of like different kind of programs for each person in the program. There's like 25 all up only, so it's not huge. But there's some people who've been there for like a few years and have like really established programs, like one who even has his own like business kind of, which is what I was doing a lot this week with that particular client,
Yep.
who's like very autistic and nonverbal and has a lot of kind of like stimming going on a lot of the time.
Yep.
But yeah, we do a lot of like I was definitely like warned about certain things before like meeting people, like what their behaviors are like what like if they're risk to like be violent or like just incontinence, things like that. Like and
So,
then examples of.
so what sort of workplace health and safety training did they give you to start?
Uh well, at first, I mean, I guess workplace health and safety training is I'm doing first one this coming Saturday.
Right.
But I didn't for that particular day. I was keen to get in there and
Yeah. Yeah.
meet them and like work practically with them. So I guess I was like, oh, I'll just see how it goes. But it went really well. Yeah. I found
Do you,
like just being perceptive was really powerful with the nonverbal
yeah.
products, especially. Yeah. There's only
Do
two,
you,
so
okay.
yeah.
And do you have signs around the center around for anything to do with safety? Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, like pretty
Yeah.
much everywhere. Pretty
Yeah.
much everywhere.
So there's two different views on what's going on in the industry for sure,
Yeah.
isn't it? Like it's an interesting comparison, Zoe, around that.
Yeah, very much.
Even though that'd be a day where Hamish is working as a day visiting centre, is that correct?
Yeah, I
And
mean, you take them from the center and then out to do activities and then back to the center
yeah,
to do more activities and then back home,
yeah,
basically.
yeah, yeah. Good. Okay. Thanks for sharing those workplace health and safety views.
Oh,
Let's get back into it. Right. So risk management. I think this is crucial for nearly everything we do anyway, no matter whether we're working in a care environment, but even when we're working in a centre with participants coming in, I'm sure you, Abby, would have certain workplace health and safety procedures to do and look at risk management as well in the centre. Yeah. And Kylie, in your role, is there specific things that you must follow around safety work processes?
I walk with my walker.
Yep.
So everywhere I go, I walk with my walker, except when I go to the toilet.
So then are you looking for risks and trip hazards and
Yes.
yes, things like that? Right.
Yeah.
And it's a safe environment for you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm at a falls risk
Yep.
because of my spinocerebellar ataxia.
Yep.
So
Yes.
I have to keep out, like I have to keep an eye on trips and hazards and
Yes. Yes.
things like that in the workplace.
Yes. So it's almost like doing risk management all the time, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Kylie. So risk management for an organization, it's around the financial risks there. If they're not having a safe environment, of course, they're going to lose a client base, and poor governance that leads to mismanagement, which can happen in certain organizations, can actually cause risks. So it is an issue when you've got some people who might be managing nearly everything in the organization. What if something happened to them? How does the organization then carry on and fill that space? But also we do know that people who are living in care can also have their rights overlooked or violated. It actually could be controlled, which we know that can happen in certain conditions. Some people have been neglected and abused, and some people's health issues have been neglected. Think about some of the high profile cases we've heard in the media in the past few years around the abuse of power for working with people in their homes and not actually doing the care. And that person ended up dying from not having the right care, even though that carer has actually been put in jail for that. That person suffered years and years of neglect. But we've heard too many cases of this happening. So the risk management for you when you go out, it's about managing that quality of care. If you're going out into homes or offering in-centre care, and think about the client and the participant. When we talk about having their rights overlooked or violated, there could be certain circumstances why rules are made around what they can and can't do, but also to think about that autonomy of choice that somebody should have the right to still have, which can be quite difficult if you're a worker and that's happening. How do you help that? Which is quite a struggle because it could be going against a system that's made certain rules, very rigid. Is there some other way that you can help that participant be heard or to feel validated? Or is there some way for you can help them in a different way if they're not allowed to have something or do something? Can you offer something different in that perspective? So I'm just thinking, Zoe, around your participant not being able to have the drink they want. Is there an alternative that they might be able to offer? Could be something there.
Yeah, I think for the most part they try and push water and just
Yeah.
like herbal teas,
Yes. Yeah.
which, whilst they drink, it's very different to
Yeah.
coffee and that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah. So, health conscious, but it's still, like we say, and we do teach, that dignity of risk, that choice is often controlled. And that's a part of the system we work in as well. But like I say, always checking a client's health papers as well, their records. That could be a reason why certain things are done certain ways. So with risk management as an organisation, the effects that that can have a negative stereotype on an organization is actually low socioeconomic status and around low self-esteem of workers and people who are in the care. And there could be isolation, lack of social support networks. So you think about if you're in a care situation, the social networks have to come to you. You're not going, you might be bedridden. So it makes it quite awkward. And even though some organizations are really good at with social networking for participants, others don't get that. And what happens is that low self-esteem, they pull back, they withdraw, but that can become a workplace health and safety issue because they could become ill. And then that becomes a risk management issue from there. So let's have a look at the factors that might contribute to risk for your specific work industry. So let's go youth work. Thinking about youth work, what risks could be related to working with young people?
They could be intoxicated or on drugs.
Yes, yes.
So therefore there's a risk that
yes.
they might get violent.
Yes, that's very true, Kylie. Yes.
Feel like youth might be more likely to just run off, like take off.
Yes, flight.
Yeah,
Right. And often when we were doing groups, we'd have to have a spotter for the runner.
Yep.
And then somebody'd call out, "We're on the run.
Yeah.
We're on the loose."
Oh.
And we would take a group of young people to go and do community work to get work skills. And there was always one that was determined to either get to the closest Macca's they could find. Then we might have passed it on the way. So we knew where they were going to two places, to either the park where they used to all hang out and smoke, or to the Macca's, which was about 3/4 of a kilometre down the road. And you would have known it was going to happen because as soon as you got there, why can't we have Macca's? Can't we go back? And you're like, we'd all look at each other and go, just beware. So who's spotted today? So that person would then have to follow. We couldn't physically, we could ask them to come back. And we'd have to ring the school, say, this has happened. Often we'd have our police liaison officer who worked at the school as well come out and bring them either back to the group or have to take them back to school because they'd gone against school policies. But yes, that's a huge one. What about social isolation, working with young people? Because when you work with some people, they withdrawn, they shut down, you don't know what's going on. And for their own mental health, the risks that are there. And you can see them not connecting with others. So that becomes a risk specific to young people. What about, well, we had that in the news 2 nights ago around families going to camps to learn how to stop using electronic devices. And the use of electronic devices can be distracting, and then they're not going to be pay attention. That causes a risk. For when I was working, we used to have to say, right, all mobile phones, they were supposed to be left at school. Often there'd be reasons why my parents might need to contact me, things like that. But we'd have to put them into a bag or a container when we got somewhere, because we found, okay, we'll try the trust. You can hold your phone, but you're not going to do it whilst you're working. You cannot use your phone. That was too much temptation. Okay, everybody's going to put their phone in here. We'll lock it whilst we're working together. And at break times, you can have your phone. A lot of complaining around that, but it was an issue because we either had somebody not doing their part, which slowed down the process of whatever we're working on, or it was a trip hazard. It was literally a trip hazard. They'd be looking like this and on their phones and walking. So there's another issue. Anybody can think of any issues around the wider community service sector? So let's say working in a neighbourhood centre.
Helen, you were talking about the phones before. Only 2 weeks ago, a study came out which said that 41% of the mental illness we've got today comes from young people that have been neglected and abused. Well, in that report, another report, which many people have suspected, electronic, if you a young person, maybe even 19 or 20, it's not distracting you, it's actually putting more pressure on you. Give you an example, if you have your town, 80% of the people who go there in the court orders. They have no choice.
Yeah.
Okay. And a lot of them, they get their phone taken away, get a very limited phone given to them, no computers or anything while they're doing that course. And it's all court orders, so there are different rules where you can do a lot of things. But it does put a lot of pressure on kids. And it's not only distracting them, it's like, if you want to help a kid, to me, my starting point is first you get them to trust you, then you get them to see the purpose why you're there. And then once you do that, get his want and turn it into a destination. And he can see the journey himself.
Yeah.
So, you can't talk about what you do unless you know the person.
Yeah. So, Carlson, I've seen your hand up. Welcome.
Sorry, I've got a bit of food. Sorry. And sorry I'm late as well, Helen, by the way. So,
no
hey, everyone.
worries. We're just discussing factors that contribute to risks in certain work industries. And we're just talking about youth work and community services. Just to catch you up.
Perfect.
All right. So we're also discussing lots of risk management tonight. So individual support can provide positive responses to most risks because we have the following in place. We should have legislations from our organisations in place. We should have service sector standards that are based on and regulated by legislation. Industry and sector codes of practice, so separate different codes to working in client care to a neighbourhood centre. Industry sector and organisational charters of clients or consumers' rights. Zoe, this might be something for you to think about looking at. The Charter of Clients or Consumers' Rights, which is in the care industry, individual support. Organisational policies and procedures are actually specific to each organisation. There's a level that each policies and procedures must reach, but then they can be added upon per organisation. internal and external procedures to investigate cases of abuse and neglect, and continuous monitoring and review of workplace policies and procedures and practices. These are crucial to client care. These should be in place for every organisation. It might look different in every organisation, but they should be in practice, because when you have audits come out to organisations, this is where auditors can pick up around whether organisations are implementing systems that are for direct care and safety. And risk, when they talk about care and safety, risk is right up here beside it. So that risk management comes under the organisation's governance. Now, strategic planning is about planning for the now and the future. And that planning is directed at certain client care, depending on the client, type of clients that you have within a service. And the care is geared towards them. Now, often you might be in a disability support service, you might be in an aged care service, you might be in a young person's care centre. Each one has a plan on how the governance manages the risks, the processes in the centre, the general operations, because it's all about the organisation's aims, and you as a worker is about protecting the rights of the clients. Now we're talking about consumers of service here, that it has to match the policy and procedures of the organisation. This is where some things do not balance up for certain organisations. This is where you might identify things. Good workplace health and safety management systems, policies and procedures are put in place for everybody's safety. It's the law. Fair Work Australia, the Workplace Health and Safety Act, put in by the government, is to ensure worker safety, client safety, organisational safety. So often you would have to do a risk assessment in your workplace, and you would often have a chart, and you might be doing a general every bi-monthly workplace health and safety check. And a workplace health and safety officer generally does this. But if you identify a hazard, you have a right, you have an obligation, and to report that as well. So the key points for a workplace health and safety manager is around looking for managing hazards and ensuring risks that are identified in the organisation. But there's also procedures that you have in place to assess the risk of harm. But if an injury comes from a hazard, how is that reported? How is that dealt with? How is that managed as a crisis situation? Your organisation should have procedures here to follow. How do you develop and implement strategies to eliminate the risks? That's by carrying out regular reviews. So a workplace health and safety officer would do regular reviews, checks. You often have WorkSafe Australia come out and do organisational audits, 6 monthly and 12 monthly. And they would actually identify things that are done well. They would do checks on who has done the training. Is the training up to date to industry standards? There should be a record of everybody who's done the training. And everybody should understand the guidelines on how to manage a risk and report a risk in an organization. And often in the sectors that I've worked, we actually would have a checklist on the wall. If we identified a risk in the center, who did we have to notify, which was our workplace health and safety officer? Who was that at that time? Because it often changes. We actually had a policy where everybody had to do a month of workplace health and safety training and then be an officer. So we could share the workload and everybody learned how to do that role and manage that. We had to practice every 3 months, do the alarm testing, how we exit the building, all those sort of things. You'd have the center full. We'd have to do the whole thing. We couldn't warn anybody. We had to go through the whole processes. That's good practice. That's organizational good practice. So let's come back out of that. So procedures for identifying hazards and risks. You, of course, have your eyes there. You're observant. You're watching everything. You're making sure that you're following the policies and procedures for reporting risks. So there should be a folder in organizations around risk management and risk reporting. And this is where certain procedures have lapses in processes due to not enough education for the workers, because often people won't report what they see or they don't know how to report it. So if you've seen a bruise on a participant that you're working with, how do you report that? If that person just says it's nothing, how do you know it's not nothing? So the challenge here is making sure you adhere to, if it is nothing, if it has just been a bump, then okay. What about if it was something more serious than that and you didn't report it? This is why childcare centres will report bumps and scrapes. Schools report it to the families. As long as certain notifications happen in care, the workers should be reporting the identification. And the first step for you as a worker is to become familiar with your workplace policies and procedures, to understand where that risk management form is kept. How are you supposed to fill that in? And organizations will often conduct workplace health and safety risk assessments, as we said, and we actually have to document that whole procedure when we do that. This is best practice, mind you. How each organization does that, that's interesting. But when an audit happens and they haven't got the evidence that these things have been in place, then there's issues. Right. So what are the procedures that you have to follow when you're organized and identifying these hazards and risks? I know that when we would be having an event at the neighborhood center that I worked at, which encompassed the homelessness center, childcare, mental health, and emergency relief. And to do a small open day, it would take us a day going through the workplace health and safety policies to ensure we had exits and entries open and clear, tables and chairs in appropriate places, out in the garden area, were there any trip hazards, were there any issues with tree branches, bits and pieces falling down, Had we had clear walkways in the centre as well as outside the centre? And we'd have to go around with our checkboard and identifying anything that was out of place, making sure it was put back, ready for an open day. And it's a lot of work, because then when other organisations would come in and would be presenting, where do they park? How do they bring their equipment in? What sort of equipment? Will it be, will there be any risk for participants here? It's a whole process. The issue with not doing that process was actually going against organisational policies and procedures and our duty of care with the Workplace Health and Safety Act. It can all come back to bite you, because if something had happened and just per se that a client fell over and we hadn't identified a trip hazard, we're liable. The organisation is liable. If you've done that checklist and you're correct and notified, and it's more to do with how the client was walking that day, or there wasn't anything identified there that they tripped on, they just tripped, they just fell, then that is identification that that person would get help, of course, but then it's not a case of law here. Because whenever you're in a community area, building, shopping centre, they all have to represent a safe space to be, because the insurance liability is high. But it's about us helping identifying these risks and making sure the people that are using the services we are attending to, that they're safe. Make sure that you question with your supervisor if there's anything that you do not understand. Make sure you're reviewing your practices here too. So workers can contribute to the reviews of reporting incidences and accidents. And by raising concerns at staff meetings or through forums within organisations is a good start. Is it something that you can have a one-on-one situation with your supervisor and talk to? Of course, you'd have to consider how that would be received, because we know we've had some discussions tonight to know that that mightn't be heard, but at least you spoke up about it. And for you as an individual working in that area, common issues that for you to identify are around manual tasks, infection control, personal safety, and stress and fatigue. That stress and fatigue in the workplace is quite high. So noticing that, noticing what your colleagues are doing, noticing what yourself is doing, how you're reacting in that environment, it's crucial before you become a risk to your environment. Right. We want to look at, how do you minimize manual handling risks? Now, Hamish, you're probably somebody who's in that field right now.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So let's have a quick discussion before we go on break. Can you tell me what you've been shown, because I know you're new to the role, what
Yeah.
have you been shown that you do to minimize risks for
Well,
your
we
clients?
have at least one worker per client at all times,
Mhm.
usually more. Usually it's like 2 to 1 even, just due to like a couple of workers wouldn't physically be able to stop a client if they lashed out or something like that. So like there's protective measures for that, I guess. As well as like if they were like gonna like abscond and like just run outside or like do things like that, which like I interestingly did have like one little moment like that, but didn't realize they actually knew what they were, how long they'd been going to the program, and they knew exactly where they were going. Because this guy, Ed, who's nonverbal and very, very friendly and very like nice and stuff, but very grabby and wants you to squeeze him all the time and stuff like that. He stims a lot. But then he just kind of like walked out the door, and I was like, I didn't know the bathroom was just out there. And they were like, and he's quite capable of doing that. I was like, oh no, where's he going? Like, I kind of like
Yeah.
ran down to my new boss, and he's like, oh no, he's fine, dude. Like, he knows exactly where he's going. I was like, oh, thank God. 'Cause I was like, oh no, did I just lose somebody? But yeah, because he just very confidently like walked off. There was nothing I could do. I didn't feel confident enough at the time to like
Mm,
stop him, because it was like my first day with him, and I didn't want to create any bad energy between us at all. Like, especially,
mm.
yeah, it's all energy based, and kind of,
So
yeah.
it certainly could have been a manual handling risk on your behalf in that you might have wanted to
Yeah, like
prevent
I
them.
didn't want to do the wrong thing,
Yeah.
and like hold him, even though, you could, but like it would have been totally the wrong thing to do. I'm glad I didn't do anything. Like, I'm glad I just let him go,
Mm,
and then just went to someone more senior and was like,
yeah.
is that normal for him to do that? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. But yeah, he wasn't like outside on the street or anything like that. He just kind
No,
of
no. Yeah.
left the room he was with me, doing a task.
So you were on alert. You were aware something was changing. So
Yeah,
good spotting.
yeah,
Yeah, actually, thank you for sharing that.
that's all good.
Zoe, do you have to support clients to move about in their homes, or when you're there to do support, is there things that you would do that you would have to do manual handling for? Like,
Currently, no, they're all pretty mobile and can get themselves around. Like one of them has a like walking stick,
yep.
but he's capable of doing it all himself. But a few years ago, I did um God, what was it? Personal care.
Mm-hmm,
Like I
mm-hmm.
did a course for that, and so like one of the big things that they mentioned was proper training on using the equipment, like hoists and all that, like
Yes.
actually making sure the client is in there properly so that they don't fall and hurt themselves,
Yeah.
but also in the usage of it so that the worker doesn't hurt themselves by improperly trying to lift the people.
Mm-hmm. Crucial for your own back, for your muscles, and then if you slipped, then the participant slips. It just goes on. I know then when I worked in the special education department in a high school setting, we had to have the hoist to lift one young person out of their chair for toileting, but it was that manual risk management of learning how to use the hoist, appropriate lifting ourselves, the transferring process itself, which is besides the lifting. It was such a routine, regular thing we all had to be trained in, which most of us had to go and do it 2 or 3 times to get the full scope of all the different individual things we were required to do. We're in Education Queensland, so you're on site doing these things. So the care and the risks are high, but it was very processed, very stepped out. Is that what you found, Zoe, that it was a real process that you had to
It
follow?
was, and also, like different places have different equipment because the place I worked in had places that, like, because it was an aged care facility, one
Mm,
half of it was a newly renovated, it cost $500,000 just to get in there, but
mm,
then the other half was government funding.
right.
So you'd find the high-end people would actually have a hoist in the roof, like it
Yep.
was actually built into the ceiling that would
Mm,
take them from their bed into the bathroom and back.
mm,
But then in the government funded side, you had the old manual hoist.
Yes. Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, big difference in the quality between them, and also how much work you actually have to put into it yourself as the worker.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
yeah, the ceiling one was fully automated, whereas
Mm.
the manual, well, it's in the name, you've manually got to work it.
And you've got to have 2 workers there. It's a
Yeah.
real process. I know that when I was working for the children in out of home care with disabilities, the carers, which we had to struggle to get this equipment for them to have in the home to transfer, and the children, which when we still say children up to the age of 18 here, so being able to transfer them from a chair to be able to lay them down, to change them, to that extent, to be able to bathe them. So the carer would have support workers come in at twice a day to help. This person had 3 people in their care. And we finally got a manual hoist in there, but we couldn't use it for a week until that family and the support workers had all been trained to do it. And that poor carer had to still struggle for a whole week changing a teenage child to the size of an adult and changing them, personal hygiene, still struggling and lifting. But it took a week. We couldn't sign them off. And we said, how's this care going to continue on without this? So we had to push for more support workers to come in more frequently throughout the day. But it's a process. But that person was left for a day and a half at least struggling until we could get that process in place, because it's funding, it's NDIS, you've got processes to go through. But that hoist, it did help, but it was also frightening for the young person to be in. I know when my brother was in care and he broke his hip, and for him to be hoisted over to the showering chair, the fear that it was going to drop and break was harder. It ended up, we couldn't do it. We had to stop that process in the care facility, because no matter what they tried to reassure him, was his fear that that hoist, bigger man, was going to break. And then that means another break in the hip. So they had to devise different ways to be able to manage his hygiene. But that's also another risk there. And how do you minimize that risk? Well, we couldn't actually take his thoughts and try and minimize his fear. No matter what was done, he'd set on that was what was going to hurt him. So also think about that's another type of hazard, because then the care had to be then changed around. And then that created more physical manual handling for bed bathing, because we couldn't then get him out of the bed to the shower area. So then a whole new process had to be created around that care. But then that became more manual handling, which all had a process. The people that were doing the care for him, the actual nurses, amazing. But they were there showing us as the family how we could contribute to helping my brother to be able to bathe, and what we could do to help out as well. So we were learning some of those handling risks, but it certainly is a process. All right, it's 7:10. Let's do a stop share. All right. Hazardous manual handling. Is the work safe? Do I feel safe? This is what we're talking about for you to feel safe. It has to be done appropriately by following procedures here. It's really crucial that you have the right training. It's so important for your own health, let alone for your own safety and insurance as well, working within the organisation. And it's up to the organisation to make sure they've trained you as well properly. So I just have to pause to resume. Very touchy tonight. All right, so what do we take from that video? What must we do if we find ourselves in a situation where we could be harming ourselves? Hamish?
Report to like higher up people that you're feeling that you're unsafe or you're being hurt in this way, or this might happen to me if I keep doing this.
Yeah, definitely. And that identification that it's not working for you is the first crucial part. But it is tricky that some workers are told to, look, don't worry, you'll be right, just keep going. You've got to identify what's not working for you. Keeping yourself safe. So hazardous manual tasks. Some of the things that we can identify here, as you can see in this list here, certainly around lifting the person, that difficulty getting in and out of a car, that is very tricky for some people because sometimes their legs and their knees won't bend. So it's that really trying to manage and getting in and getting comfortable and being safe in a car as well. And as I said, that recovering from a fall brings about other fears for the participant, which then actually can make a barrier to your care. And that's something to think about in how you do things and how you understand what it would be like for them. The fear. Think about the fear of trying, even though you have a job to do. How do you express that and still be able to do the job that you need to do for them? But you have to understand their dignity of risk and choice here as well. But you will be given support workers in this role. We'll have a range of tools and equipment to help with some of the tasks above. If you're working in a centre, you'll have tools. If you're working in home, it'll depend on whether they're equipped in that home environment. Some of them do have their own tools and aids, and crutches and walkers and mobility chairs, shower hoists, shower chairs, and they're all stabilised for that person's weight and size. And individual support workplaces will have clear policies and procedures for all that manual handling task. Fair Work Australia is very strict on, if you have been harmed in the workplace, have you been following those procedures? Were you trained appropriately? And they will go through all these steps to ensure that you have been doing something correctly, but still there's a hazard, there's something missing here, and that's why you've been harmed. But as long as you've followed those procedures, or speak up. Now, injuries to the musculoskeletal system. Now here you can see where the worker is about to help lift, hands under the shoulders there, under the armpits. This person's using their legs and their arm muscles here. And they're pushing from here, not from the back here. Using that strength through the muscles and then using that strength up through the arms. So bend your knees before attempting to lift a box, which we saw in that video, of course. Some things I suppose you'd have to decide if you're going to actually attempt to do it. Because if something looks harder or if the person is much bigger than you, it's still doable, but with two people. But if you can't perform the lift safely, it shouldn't be done. Once again, attending your workplace health and safety training is crucial here to learn those techniques. And you'll often have equipment that will help you lift. Clients and participants, aged care residents in a respite service. You'll have that training, but how do you do it appropriately? So can I ask you, Hamish, do you have to do much lifting of participants?
Some, yeah. Yes, some we do.
So can I ask you, how do you go with your body size and frame compared to who you're working with? Can that be an issue at all, or?
For sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Definitely with like one guy especially, who's like kind of incontinent and definitely nonverbal and gets frustrated very easily. He makes me like worry about picking him up sometimes if he'll he's probably like 25 kilos heavier than me, I'd say. So that's something that I definitely noticing of.
Yeah.
Especially if he's like resisting, you know, if he was just trying to resist anything we were trying to do, which is actually quite a common occurrence with him, unfortunately. Yeah, but we definitely answered that with like having multiple people and people who've like, if there are people that are definitely having more of a connection with someone and they work a lot easier with them, they are definitely the person who always works with that person.
Yeah.
And then there's more like backup for that individual rather than trying to make them just do exactly what we want with every single worker.
Okay.
Notice there's a bit of a trend anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. All right. All right, let's go into breakout rooms. I know a lot of us haven't had training, but what would you think would be important around a checklist when assisting a client in and out of a bed? What do you think? And then we'll go and have a look at those checklists. All right, so let me just pause here. Okay. All righty, let's get back to it. So we were making a list of tasks that you think you should use when you're helping somebody in and out of a bed. So what did you come up with? Let's start off with Lynn. Who were you with, Lynn?
She was with me. I've been volunteered to speak.
Oh, okay, no worries.
So we came up with a couple of ones. One was like to check the surrounding area, like for any hazards, so that there's a clear path from wherever you're transferring them to the bed.
Yeah, good idea. Yep.
Um, And if you're transferring from the bed into a wheelchair or a walker, make sure the brakes are on first.
Oh, good point. Yes,
Because,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
because if you're transferring them to a walker and the brakes aren't on and they haven't got their feet properly, that's
Yep.
going to wheel straight out. They're going to face plant it.
Yes.
And same with a wheelchair. If the brakes aren't on,
Mm-hmm.
it can kind of
Mm.
slide out from under them if they haven't got the seat properly.
And I just wonder how quickly, that can happen then, because that's a real process you have to have yourself into doing, isn't it? It's like a checklist you'd have to have going. Yeah.
Yeah. And then like just when you're actually doing the lift or the support, depending on how much help they actually need, either make sure you're using the proper aids and like using them correctly, like the hoists if they've got them, or if you don't, if you've got a second worker with you, use the use of 2 people instead of 1. And if you are stuck on your own, just making sure that you are lifting, as you said with the video before, through the legs as opposed to the back.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. Yes, I can picture that. Yeah. Good
Yeah.
point.
Mhm.
I think one of the things that I found was when we were moving my brother was the actual floor, the actual coating on the floor, if it was slippery and we'd sort of go to plant our feet to move, but they'd slip on the lino.
Yeah.
So we had to end up asking for another mat next to the bed, a non-slip mat.
Yes. Yeah, and I was saying to Lynn as well, how you were saying your brother didn't like the hoist.
Mm,
When we did training years ago, all the students actually had to get into the hoist themselves and be the client for the other students. And I don't blame him. It's a terrifying experience being in it.
mm,
It like, because you've only got this like harness on that actually lifts you. Like, so 1 minute you're sitting on something solid, and then it's like you're hanging there, and
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
very awkward feeling.
yeah, yeah. And that's a good point, how the students had to get in and try it themselves and feel that lived experience
Yeah,
for some people. Yeah. Good points there. Good. Yeah, especially with the pickup on the brakes of the mobility equipment.
yeah. It's one that
Yeah.
gets missed a lot, and that,
Mm,
yeah, it then causes the extra accidents because then you've got to lift from the floor instead of the bed and all that sort of stuff.
mm. Excellent work. Good stuff. Right, Tony and Carlson, did you end up doing?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I got the notes if you want me to go, Tony.
Yes, please, mate. Please.
Good. Fundamental to any of this was observation, making sure you be observant before you start whatever you do. Making sure that there's no sharp edges, being mindful of any slip or water hazards. Again, observation, looking at the individual, engaging without being rude, whether the individual is too large for you to manage on your own, and maybe being mindful of how you state that back, that you might need to get extra help.
Yep.
Always leading with your legs and your shoulders and not your back if you're doing manual handling. Remembering your own safety at all times. Any requirements for personal protection, considering the individual. Do you need a mask, gloves, etc.? And then also thinking about what then happens with the individual when you take them out of the bed, where you're going to place them. Is it going to be in a chair, a wheelchair? Making sure it's close but safe, close enough to get in. So something along those lines.
Good pick up on the personal protection, I think, too, stands out for me. And that is it's about gathering all that equipment too, isn't it? I know with my son, when he had surgery and he had a whole leg reconstruction the top half of the leg, then the bottom half of the leg. The only part they didn't touch was the knee. So everything was broken and bones put into it, plates, rods, everything. So that leg was very immobile. So no leaning on it. And being able to maneuver him out of bed onto the wheelchair and then to get to the shower. And he's 6'6", by the way. I'm 5'6". My daughter's 5'7".
He's a short guy, yeah?
We learned from the hospital how to do it. You know, this is how you do it, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, oh, okay. It was so awkward in our own confines trying to do it, because you think of a bedroom with an ensuite. Ensuites aren't that big. So we had to end up going down to the main bathroom, but the problem was getting him from the wheelchair to the shower chair. So we found an actual slide plate that you can attach, and you can move the person sideways. So from the wheelchair, you take the handles off on the side, the hold bars. So then the chair's left open. And there was this slide that we attached to the wheelchair to the shower chair, and we would just get him to shuffle sideways over onto the shower. It took a long while, but it was safer. We did try to lift him, and we actually dropped him. So we had to go back to hospital, which it probably had to happen because he'd been sent home too early, right? We weren't capable of that care. So then we had to organize something for that immediate care. But interesting, the things that they find for you to be able to use to adapt to moving from the bed across to the wheelchair. And this slide, he could actually maneuver himself over it, but it was about 1 meter long. Things I learned, yes, it's tricky though. Hamish and Abby?
Yeah. Everyone kind of covered most of what we wrote down, to be honest, but I'll still go through kind of what we wrote. Like a couple of things I noticed that we did write that other people maybe didn't say or just said differently. Knowing the capabilities or impairments of the person you are picking up beforehand would be good. And therefore that would kind of give you more information as to like what equipment would be required and how that could, or if that could be done safely manually by somebody. Then considering yourself, do you have the appropriate training to actually do this task?
Yep.
Multiple workers need to use to safely move the client, everyone said, and using aids as well. If like a risk assessment could be done before of that person, just in case, you know, like of the area, like creating a safe pathway, a risk assessment of the client, whether they are agreeable or don't like being moved out of bed or don't like being picked up in a certain way.
Good
There's a
point.
history of
Good
that.
point. Yes.
Yeah, that's mostly what I wrote down.
Wow. I think we've identified some good things and things that, you know, at that time I hadn't had the training, but you know how to. We'd have training, but it was like thrown at us that we had to then maneuver my son over. And also basically the physiotherapist said, did you do this, you do this, you do this. Probably spent 10 minutes with us and they were gone. And we're like, So basically the next thing you know, we're walking down in a wheelchair with him to go to get a maxi taxi to take him home, because we couldn't get him into the car. So that was our first hurdle. But then doing that manual handling, the you know, in hindsight, we'd already done a scan of, okay, how are we going to, we already tried the wheelchair into the ensuite, how we're going to maneuver. We practiced that before we brought him home. But it all went back to that training. Some good points there. So let me go back and let's bring up our screen. So when you reflect on those practices that we've just talked about, it certainly identifies the knowledge and the skills we need to have beforehand, before doing any of these jobs that we're looking at to assist people. And the stress that it can put on your body by doing things that incorrectly, I think we need to really be taking into account, do you feel forced into doing it? Or should you be able to say, I'm not ready to do that. I don't know enough. I haven't had enough training. But when you're in the process of doing this all the time, reflecting on your own practices are crucial here. Being able to update your skills whenever new skills come out. So being able to either check in with your workplace health and safety officer to see if there's any new skills that have came in and new policies, because Safe Work Australia will update constantly around practices, and for you to be able to identify gaps in the practice and seek support and suggest training, upskilling, but for you to reflect on your own capacity to monitor how your actions could prevent accidents or any other incident in the workplace is crucial here, and it's part of your duty of care. It's as simple as that. It's your role. It's your job. You have to make sure you manage this. So to maintain currency, can I just ask Zoe, when you did that training around using a hoist, how long does that certificate last for, that training?
So it was just part of our Cert IV in individual support.
Right. Yeah.
So it was just part of that qualification. So
Right. Okay.
yeah, I
So
don't
it's not.
know. I would say, I think she said something like you have to do like yearly updates on it, like
Right.
refresher courses just to keep on top of it. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I know with working in the supported education unit, that was 6 monthly, but often organizations do 12 monthly, like you say. I was just wondering if you remember what it was, because first aid has a certain time frame around updates, redoing the whole course, the CPR part, the first aid, so other practices in the workplace, especially when there's machinery involved, but manual hoist lifts, mobile lifts and equipment. You think about the actual care of this equipment as well. That's another duty that has to be done as well. And the checks on these have to be done yearly as well to ensure they're still in good working order. For you, yourself, a risk for you is stress, and that becomes a hazard in the workplace for many occupations and workplaces. So for you, the physical response to stress, yes, Carlson?
Yeah, so I've got it across you, Helen, with my hand. I did some review of the stress bucket. I don't know if you've seen the stress bucket as a concept. It's basically the it actually was more to do with grief, the grief section of the study. By the way, I'm finding this all really interesting, by the way. But the stress bucket is a bucket that fills up over time, slowly fills up, and it's water that goes into it. And then eventually what happens is it overflows, and that overflow is you get overwhelmed and all of the physical effects that go with that. And it's so obvious, but what the suggestion is that what you need to do is punch holes in the stress bucket, and that the water then continually just goes out. Water will always go in, you'll always get stressed, but it gets controlled. But what then happens as well once you do that is so let's say one of the holes is you like to go to the gym, punch a hole in that, but then you run out of time, and then you block that thing that you like doing, and eventually all the things that you like to do you block, and then the bucket overflows again and you become overwhelmed. And then you couple that with your vulnerability to stress, your susceptibility to stress, and not being able to support your reactions to it, that then leads itself to the problems from there. So the principle being is that you always are going to feel stress, but you've got to make sure that you have an outlet for that stress. And that's things like redundancies due. You probably get redundant, but just make sure you've got other things in your life as well. I just found that really interesting.
Yeah. No, I'll actually, I'll go and get the link for that. I've got it here, but I'll put it up in the break.
It's really interesting.
And so how would you say that benefits you? Would you use that tool, Carson, yourself?
I just learned I learned so much from just reviewing that. It just made so much sense to me. In my job, there's a lot of stress around mental stress because of the work that I do, and pressure. I'm even working now in the background here, but the pressure of work and then ultimately what then happens is they then just cull you, make you redundant, and you're finished. So you've just got to be prepared for that, and you've got to go, doesn't define me, but I make sure I've got other outlets to stop that overflowing. So I find it it was only the weekend I discovered it, but I thought that makes so much sense.
Yeah, excellent. I'm just going to put the link up here. I found one. So if you have a look at that, talks about dealing with stress and how you carry that bucket with you, how it leaks, creates bigger stresses. They're missing the tap that fills up the bucket. If you have a look at it, it's by Dr. Teresa Comer, and she's a clinical psychologist. There's all different models of this as well, but that's just one that came up that I thought it was a reputable link for that. Good stuff. Thank you, Carlson. I don't think we actually pay attention enough to stress. We often overlook it because we feel the weight of our responsibilities, and we prioritize that over us. But our physical responses start to take over if we're having stress. And being able to do some of these activities here to help that. But those indicators, the freeze, flight, or fight response. So often the fight response is there for a lot of people, and that says I'm helpless. Here. How do I remove the stress? The flight response, take off, ignore it, or freeze and live with it. That just compounds it and makes it worse. So we have to find our own ways of managing stress in the workplace, no matter what industry you're in, because it's about your body's attempt to tell you a signal that there's a problem. And it's mainly what we call it, a physical response that happens, but it then involves the thoughts and the emotions that happen with that. And that all then connects. And we often mightn't be able to move stress from our lives, but we can change how we respond to it. Carlson?
So I'm on a roll now. I certainly because I looked at it, but also something very interesting in relation to the flight or fight is the paradox of fear. I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it. I just succumb to the fear, by the way, but the paradox of fear.
Can you explain what the paradox of fear is?
So it's the fear of doing something that makes something worse than it actually is. You're fearing the outcome as opposed to what really is going to happen. And the example, there's many examples, but the paradox of fear is really interesting to look at. There was a doctor who was a consultant who used to around his peers sweat. And he felt very uncomfortable in that situation. So what he did, he went to see a specialist. And by the way, hypnosis can be very good for this as well. But went to see a specialist to discuss it and said, embrace it. Embrace the fact that you sweat. You do that and you acknowledge it. So when you then meet people, you look at me, I'm sweating. It's disgusting, isn't it? And within a week, he stopped sweating. And so he addressed that by highlighting it. And people didn't even notice, didn't bat an eyelid, and his receptors stopped. But it's a thing around paradox of fear, and it's a really interesting subject.
And that is a Gestalt psychotherapy tool as well, and working with the paradox. So when I first learned about this, I was doing Gestalt psychotherapy studies, and I was told, embrace your pain. It's a message. And I said, I will not embrace it. I do not want pain. I don't want to have to live with it. And the response was from the trainer, you've got it. What are you going to do with it? Oh, well, I've been to the doctor. No. What are you going to do with the pain? Why is that pain there? Question yourself. It's telling you your body's saying something to you. You're not connecting that enough with the importance of the information it's giving you. You can tell your doctor you've got pain and they can give you a pill, but you still have to walk away and manage the pain. How do you accept it as a part of you, as a part of change? How do you acknowledge it? How do you thank your pain for being there? I could not get that concept when I was told that. I was so resistant to that. Now I so get it in the sense that I had to tip it on its side and have a look from a different perspective. If I could react to somebody else telling me they were hurt and in pain, so that meant there's a problem. How do you live with that better? What can you do to manage it, as well as have your medical intervention, but still you can have pain? It's the body's internal. Sorry, Tony?
I would just say you sounding like you've been to a spiritual workshop.
Well, Gestalt therapy is really around dissecting life. And
I've said that.
Yeah.
Pain always means something.
Yes, well, it's actually more of a method of living with and using and thanking that pain. Now, when you thank that pain for telling you something, you can act upon it. If you don't have pain, you're still wondering the what ifs. But when you have that pain, and if it's ongoing, it's very hard to thank it. It is very hard. But it's there.
Helen, can I tell you something stupid? Oh, some of you will think it's stupid. I've told people this because it's something I've learned a long time ago when I was in Goa. When I do it, if you're feeling bad, if you're feeling depressed, next time you have a glass of water, make sure it's living water instead of dead water, and there's a difference between that. And before you drink it, take a second and say thank you to the water. A simple thank you to the water. And after a week, or maybe even 3 days, you will feel yourself not so depressed.
Mm.
Because you're simply taking a basic thing in life. Water is more important than money, more, and you just take yourself back to an animal state. Thank you. And that sounds stupid, but whether
Yeah.
people believe it or not, I know I do, and I know a few others have tried it, and they have thanked me for it.
And the other thing, Helen, is that,
Yep.
the principle of embracing fear.
Mm.
It's like they talk about actors and actresses are told to do that all of the time. They're told that you have to actively seek it out. So that thing that makes you uncomfortable, you seek it out.
Yeah.
And if this was me 15 years ago or 20 years ago, I'd have to resolve it. But the older I've got, that I'm kind of coming out the other side of it, the less I'm bothered about it. It just is the way I am.
Mm.
But if I was 30 or 35, I'd have to be looking at that more seriously. But the older you get, the less important it becomes, if you're lucky.
But then you have to
In
be
a way,
careful of.
I agree with you. It does become less important, Carlton. But on the other hand, it becomes more demanding and more. It's like if someone gives you $10 and they've only got 15, that means a lot. If someone
Yeah.
gives you $10 and they've got 1,000, that means nothing. Same with the age, because when you get older, we do have less energy, but by doing a little bit, it means more than what you did when you're 30, because you
Yeah.
have more energy.
Very true. Now, some of those things that you identified, Carlson, around those high stretch situations, you talked about the sweating. It also goes with the dry mouth, rapid heartbeat, shallow, short breathing, the mood swings, the irritability. So you've got your physical and your emotional signs that come out for many people with stress, but being stressed when you're actually confronted with that stress and to be in touch with it, that's the paradox you're going through in that stepping into it and actually acknowledging it. We're then saying that what we call maladaptive practices, so those practices that we were using to try and manage it, they don't help us adapt. So that's why they're called maladaptive. So we need to change those practices. And then when we confront something with, what is it called? When we actually use something to help treat the same thing, and it's like being, like having, oh gosh, I can't think of the word. I think it's called impression therapy, where you have to be actually involved into that process and be reintroduced to the trauma, the stress, and confront it.
Yep.
And
That makes sense.
touch it so you can understand it, so then you can get through it to the other side. And the more you do the fright and the flight, the more you are not. So the more the stress builds up, the more issues that happens in the body.
It's a memory muscle, I think. When the more that you do something, the more the lesser the. I'm
just trying to think of the word exposure. I couldn't get the word out. That exposure to the very thing, or the acceptance, like with the sweating, the final acceptance of that was happening to that person, eventually triggered somewhere that it didn't have to keep going as bad, because what was happening, that person was still in flight mode. So that even though they might still have ordinary sweating, every time they got into a situation with other people, their stress levels were high. They weren't recognizing that. They were just recognizing the sweating that was making their self-esteem feel poor. But what actually happened with that exposure to acceptance took away some of the fear and the stress. So this is your paradox, as they call it. Have to be in it to and force it and push it to go through. Only in certain circumstances, of course. But to be able to be exposed to something and gradually, it's like with somebody who has a car accident. How do you get back into the car? And it's small exposure to it. But we have to understand how we are going to manage stress. You would be having a therapist help you with this, of course. This is not something you can undertake on your own. But it's good to know about this for you to be able to say to somebody, how about you go and get some help with this and let a professional work with you, with your stress, your fears, your pain. There's many different people that you could be working with, but it's about you identifying that you need help. Now, of course, when we had the pandemic, everybody was on high alert. Then we come out of that and we wanted to just forget it. And what that then created was the non-identification of problems for people. Hence, the pressure on the mental health system, because people let it go until there was an actual real problem with their mental health. Their stress, the isolation, the pressure that people felt became too much, but they didn't reach out until it's a problem. When you start to see those signs of stress on your body, you're thinking, you're processing, you're not paying enough attention, you're tired, you're irritable, your heart might be slowing down. You could actually have short breaths too. You can often suddenly always feel you're on the go, you're ready for something to happen. Something's not right. That feelings of agitation and prickliness, and you can't settle. There's signs to go, I need to go and talk to someone. First to go to your GP, of course. But it's crucial as workers out there for us in the field, in community services. I can't stress it enough, because in certain areas, you can have burnout and overload. And when you ignore that, you can become very sick. I know from experience from that. And it takes a while to come back around out of it. It forces you to learn new strategies. It forces you to make sure you're on top of the list of care. We can be all very good at offering our care for everybody else and putting everybody else before our needs. That's what I did, and it didn't work for me. I did it for too long, and I didn't take care. But you learn. And for you to learn before you go out in that field of work, is that role you're in working for you? Is it causing too much stress? How can you change that? How can you support yourself? Can I reach out for support from my supervisor? Do I need to get extra support? You do all those things. If that then still does not make you feel comfortable in that role, maybe think about shifting roles. Try a different area. There's many different roles in the community services sector. And this is where you've got to find your fit. Because often when you start, 6 months, 12 months into it, you start to, it's just not giving me what I thought it was. or I'm feeling too stressed and tired. Can I manage that? Yes. Can I manage that? No. Then you know different avenues of what you might need to change. But it's important we identify that, because it can make you really sick. And if you're not out there doing the work, who is? We need you on the ground, healthy and looking after yourselves. I want to stress that importance for you as workers ready to go out in the field. On that note, let's have a healthy 10-minute break and come back and have a look at some of our assignments, which won't be too stressful.
So you're gonna have a day and we just have to wait.
Right.
Then we just have to wait for Helen. When she's get time, then we can do the other one in front of her.
Yeah, maybe we can do either. Maybe Helen, if she can do it either side.
Can I ask you to please take out your email addresses before we send the recording out, because it's a privacy issue.
Let me do that now. Ciao.
Oh, you mean take out the email from there?
Yes, from the chat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I put my credit card details in?
Just send me a private WhatsApp.
I'll do that. No, sorry, you got the email. But yeah, I'll give you my private credit card details as well, Tony.
No, I don't want
What?
that.
Huh?
No.
Dumb.
Okay. All right. I've just asked about permission to do role plays on, could possibly be Sunday. How does that work for people?
It works good for me. So if we do this on Saturday, then we can do your one on Sunday, and it's all over.
That's a bit dark, and it's all over.
I mean,
Final,
in a nice way.
Gentlemen, I'm waiting on confirmation to be able to do 12:30 till 2 on Sunday. Okay.
Yes.
So we'll go with that. So let me share my screen. Right. So in your learner guide too, don't forget there's many links for managing stress too. So make sure you go and have a look at some of the strategies that they suggest in there and the links. There's quite a few good ones in there. I had a look. Right. Love signs, safety signs and symbols, and what is the meaning behind these? How do you tell what something means? We really want to make sure that you understand your practice standards, understanding what protective gear you use, what emergency signs and equipment are. So there's all different types of safety signs, symbols to alert you to hazards, show you the location of emergency equipment, give instructions for dealing with emergency situations. So you should have a crisis directive in all agencies where you work around. If a crisis happens, the steps that you take to employ safety, notification to local authorities around police, ambulance, notifying your line manager. You might have to demobilize the center, so evacuate. You might have to lock down. You might have to make sure you can get somebody and put them to a certain area and make sure they're locked off and the rest of the people are kept safe. So we also have symbols and graphics, as they call them, and these are more noticeable than the written text words. and often they can save time in an emergency. So we have certain standards set, and these actually came from 1994 that they started with safety signs in workplaces. There were some original before that, but they discovered the colors weren't right. The symbol itself wasn't clear enough. But you have to be able to identify poisons, emergency equipment, personal protective equipment, hazards. What is a hazard? Give me an example of a hazard in a workplace, in a kitchen. I can't point it out for enough. Hamish?
Slippery floor,
Yes.
wet floor. Yeah. Equipment like lit on fire, deep fryers lit on fire. Yeah, that'd be dangerous.
Sharp knives.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, yeah, definitely more in my current job, it's way more of a hazard. In my last job, that's like an absolute requirement. So it's different. Yeah.
But then in your job right now, you couldn't have clients going to a kitchen area and being able to manage using a knife.
No.
So that's a risk assessment that you would have to do
And
to ensure they don't go into that
a
zone.
knife right next to them as well, even.
Yep.
So that's
So then think about that.
So yeah.
I actually had to use shin pads to work with a young boy who was in a behavioral management unit. And this young boy had been traumatized, and he could snap and change into aggression very quickly. So he'd kick out. So for me, as his support worker, I was the learning aid in the school. And this boy was only primary age. I think it was grade 3. So 7, 8, 9. And he would suddenly start lashing out and kicking. So my job, coming from the behavior unit into the school environment, we were allowed 1 hour a day, 3 days a week for him to be in class, to get him start to adapt to a classroom environment. That 1 hour was preparation. So his desk was separate to everybody. There were no scissors. There's no pencils. We couldn't have anything that looked descriptive for weapon type, because he could suddenly lash out and use it. So I had to set up his station of work. But we also had to have in place, if he suddenly become reactive, as something triggered in him, we had to evacuate the class and leave him in there. Otherwise, I had to evacuate him out and follow him, because he would often just walk and have to follow. I'd be on the phone notifying people. And these shin pads, I had to wear soccer socks and shin pads because he would kick out so much, and he couldn't control these. But it was about trying to have inclusive practice so he could have time in the classroom with other learners. It was a long process. It was probably not the environment for him in the long term. We had to find a safer environment for him to be in, but to ensure everybody else was safe as well. So they did eventually find a school unit that suited his needs, which was good. But the protective gear I had to wear, and I remember my kids looking at me going, "Whoa, Mum's getting the shin pads on. She's off to work again." And they say, "You look like a wrestler." But you got to protect yourself, because like you say, Hamish, some of the clients, they can't control those behaviors, and they don't want to be doing them. They just can't control them. So how do we work with that safely and still include them? We don't want to go to exclusion here. but there are boundaries, of course, in all the things that we can do and support. But my message here is to make sure you have the equipment set up to protect yourself. But we also used to have signs in the classroom around reactive behaviors. And if there was a reactive behavior, if a chair was thrown, or what everybody else knew to do to make sure that everybody was safe. It's a process. I used to have to go in and scan areas when I had young people in doing activities in the kitchen, that the knives weren't, I used to always ensure that the knives weren't too sharp. There weren't too many scissors. There was selective people working those equipment if we were doing cooking. We had monitors, we had peer workers in there. It was just around that excitement that they would get silly with the equipment. But keeping them monitored certainly is a task. Who can think of, what does the poison sign look like?
Like a yellow triangle with a black scary bacteria thing in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's the one.
Yeah. What is the sign for a fire hazard?
It's a yellow triangle with a black fire flame inside of it.
All right. We're just going to stop here. Record. So what safety signs have you found, Tony, and what hazard signs have you found?
Well, a hazard sign is your chip hazard, which
Yep.
is yellow with a black triangle and someone chipping in the middle of the triangle.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a slippery surface, which once again is yellow. All hazard signs are yellow with a triangle and someone slipping.
Yep.
Safety signs, you have emergency and you've got PPE. PPE is normally it's a blue sign with helmet and gloves and all that in it.
Yep.
And
Excellent.
First aid is green with a white cross.
Yes. On that first aid sign, what other colours do you know that symbolises first aid?
Blue? No, blue is
No.
safety.
Red and white.
Yeah.
Now that's changing over to the blue and white. Because if you notice the hospital signs on the highway, what colour are they? They're all blue and white.
Yeah, because apparently they want to make all the red signs. They're going to change the fire extinguisher, which is red. And apparently they want to change that because they want all the red signs to be what they are in most of Europe, which means no, it's prohibited. If it's a red, no, it's a simple no.
Excellent. Good work. Carlson, did you find anything?
Yeah, I did actually. Sorry. I did. I quite liked a safety sign, which was a blue circle with an exclamation mark, and all accidents must be reported.
So a blue circle with an exclamation mark.
Yep.
With saying all
accidents must be reported.
Okay.
Quite like that.
Stands out, doesn't it? What's a hazard?
A hazard is something that can probably kind of immediately hurt you. A hazard like I've got one here. Actually, it's clearly not that useful. Actually, I'll change it. I was going to say oxidizing gas. I don't know what that means, but flammable gas. You know, a red warning of flammable gas, which is a hazard.
Oxidizing, that oxygen going to the gas can make it flare out.
Yeah, that's
Explosive.
But I'm not quite sure how useful that would be in community services.
Yeah.
Just trying to think. That's not really that helpful. Flammable gas, though, that could be.
Yes.
You know, you could be dealing with a kitchen within a home of sorts.
Could be. Thank you, Hamish.
Yeah, 2 safety signs I found were like, as they're all yellow triangles. So these are just 2 examples of those. One with the lightning bolt kind of going through it, electrical hazard, and there's one just with an exclamation point, just like hazard in general. Be alert, kind of, which is interesting, but that's good. And then safety signs. Blue circle sign with gloves, wear gloves, and blue sign with boots, wear boots. So
yeah,
there's 2 and 2 of those.
so some of them are more explanatory than others, because an exclamation mark, what is that?
That's just stay alert.
Yeah. So it gets your attention, but if you had English as a second language, or you were visiting Australia and you saw an exclamation mark, what would that mean to you?
Not much.
So
yeah,
it's interesting, because some of the signage, think about our beaches and our swimming and how much they still go in the water and they can't swim. And we'll have shark pictures, we'll have people swimming with a cross through them. It's still not enough, is it?
Yeah. One I found interesting was these GHS signs, a globally harmonized system sign. So that'll have like every hazard within an area. So it's a large square made up of red and white squares with different hazards, and that might discuss like the different materials or workplace hazards within one area, but all in one encompassing thing, which is interesting. The GHS sign. I think we have those a lot in the kitchen. This seems a lot. This is like gas and flame and
like that.
dark things and electric and everything. Exactly. Yeah.
Like that, Hamish.
Yeah, and also like just in like a big square like that. It's called a GHS sign. Yeah. We're very similar to that, yeah.
Yep. So you have all the regulations here too. So here's your GHS pictogram ones, but they actually then explain, like your exclamation mark there, Carlson.
Yeah.
It hazardous to ozone layer, respiratory tract. So this is quite different again in the usage of that exclamation mark. So it does stand out. Now, this one here gets me aquatic toxicity. There's not enough water there for me to think that that's about water. When you first look at it, the tree's so dominant, isn't it? So it's interesting. This is a good one with the health hazards here around the body with the electricity running through it. Abby, what did you find?
I had, I don't know if it counts. I had like for safety an exit sign. I guess that is safety, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
So that's, you probably all know, it's green with the white writing, I think. And same with the first aid. I had that as well. And that's green and white as well. For hazards, I just chose 2 things that I have at my work, which is the radiation hazard, which is a black triangle with a black, it looks like a fan in the middle with a yellow background.
Yep.
The other one is for clinical waste, which is the same black with a yellow background. And I don't really know how to describe what the symbol looks like. I can copy a photo into the chat. It's, yeah, I don't really know what it is meant to be. Yeah, so that's what we use at work.
So do you know that the flame symbol is one of the most universal symbols across the world? Same with the exit. And it's the colors that matter. So you'll often find most exits are green with white figures on it exiting the building. So in some instances they have black, but they're mainly white with the words exit, or they've got the white background with the green figure and the green writing. But often if you think about the movie theaters, the exit signs, the hospital signs, exiting the buildings, the doctor signs, exiting schools, exiting shopping centers. Think about those universal signs, but universal around the world as well.
Hey, Helen, I'm going to do an end sign or a good night sign. I don't know what a good night sign is, but I'm going to end and say good night. So thank you very much. And we might catch up on Sunday.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Bye. See ya.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
So Lynn, did you find any signs? Were you able to put that symbol in?
Okay. Yes, I will. Okay, so just copy and paste.
Just going to put up the signs that Abby found for clinical waste. And it's actually a triquetra that, you know, it's a symbol of the 3 circles that you see a lot of people with the tattoos of the 3 circles, but it's a spiritual meaning. Celtic symbols of 3 circles together, linking. But yes, that's just reminded me of what it's similar to, and it's toxic waste, which doesn't make sense, does it? Not to worry, Lynn, you can't get it.
No,
just tell us.
It's a noise. So, you know, when they want you to have to put the hearing equipment, it's a yellow sign, and it's a warning, and then hearing noise area where hearing protection.
Okay, yep.
Yeah. That is very important for my work because a lot of our guys working with the machine, the mold, the line around the golf course.
Yeah.
So yeah, every 2 years they have to got the hearing test, and many of them is failing because they didn't wear the proper hearing equipment to protect their hearing. So I see this sign everywhere, but now I can't copy and paste. Sorry.
Oh, good. All right, let me just go back to share my screen. Safety signs, we have different danger signs. Often we have the warning signals. We have emergency signs. We have prohibition signs, PPE gear, safety wear, danger signs. There's that exclamation mark again. So it certainly is something that's in line with hazards identification. Warning signs in Australia have a yellow background with black text and large triangles, which is what you were talking about, Hamish. Warning signs, these are hazardous conditions, but they're not meant to be life-threatening. Then you've got your emergency signs we're talking about, have a green background with white text. And they're also the same symbol for the, what do you call it? The assembly area when you have to exit a building and you all have to meet in a certain area. you'll see these green signs out in certain areas around buildings, and it's called an assembly point. The green background with a white cross will often be the sign for first aid. The same with the red as well. And that, what is it called? The prohibition sign. So that's around, what do we call it? Not it's behaviors, but it's more about how people are responding and acting in public. So often you can see that too in clubs and pubs. Around the behavior that might happen after the alcohol usage.
Helen, I'll say good night. I've been up since 4:30 this morning.
Yep, we're going to wrap up now.
So